Hi, everybody, and welcome to Unchurned. I'm Josh Schachter. I'm the founder and CEO of UpdateAI, and I'm really happy to be here today with Brian LaFaille. Brian is the global lead of SaaS customer success programs at Google. That's a long and really impressive title, and we're going to talk more about that. Brian was previously leading customer success at Looker before they were acquired by Google, and he's also a very active member of the CS community. Is an advisor to many startups and has a wealth of experience. So, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Josh, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I want to start things off before we get into the real meat of the conversation in the segment I call the Unchurned segment. Unchurned, the name of our podcast, is in homage to, of course, churn and retention as a key metric for customer relationship building companies. And so let's go raw and authentic here with this. First of all, where were you born and where do you live now?
I was born in Berkeley, California. So born and raised in the Bay Area in Northern California. And I currently reside in Joshua Tree, California, down in Southern California. So my wife and I moved down here after about 10 plus years in San Francisco, decided to get into real estate and specifically in short-term rentals and Airbnbs. Before we moved down here, basically we were watching every episode of Property Brothers and Fixer Upper and everything like that. And we decided to kind of make the jump and move out of the Bay Area. And both she and I work remotely, so we were able to make it work with our jobs. And here we are.
What's the most stark difference between the tech scene in San Francisco and Joshua Tree Desert?
Oh, they couldn't be more different. You're moving from, totally urban city life with amazing restaurants and nightlife and community and things like that to like rural California. I think the population in Joshua Tree is something like 8,000 people. But given where we are in life, we have two dogs. We actually rescued a second dog when we were down here. We had an Australian Shepherd. We'd spent over 10 years in San Francisco. We're getting a little bit older and we're like, hey, the appeal of city living, isn't as high anymore, right? We're not going to the restaurants. We're not going to the clubs anymore, right? And so having some land and being able to work on some, home projects on the weekends was really fulfilling. And so I think it was a good opportunity for us to, try out a different type of life that wasn't just, honed in on San Francisco.
And I'm sure the tech scene differs. I'm sure there's not quite as many meetup happy hours out in Joshua Tree.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was also one of the differences. I mean, in San Francisco, it was so busy, right? Because we were doing customer success meetups and work happy hours, and it was just this constant carousel of activities every day. And you come down here, and what we're finding is that it's a much more vibrant and colorful community of creators in one form or another. There's a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of people in the media and production space. There's a few people in tech, there's some Bitcoin millionaires that are out here floating around in the desert. But it's a really eclectic group of people. And I think there's a very homogenous group in San Francisco. When we were there in San Francisco, it was tech and only tech and all tech. And so to come here and be, in a little bit more colorful community has been really rewarded.
Cool. I know you're active in the community. You like to share insights. You've got a lot of insights to share. I'm interested in knowing what is a book that you are reading or have read recently that you'd recommend for other listeners on the call that would be helpful to them.
Yeah. So I like I said, when we kind of connected before the call here, that I've been on a little bit of a productivity kick. And so there's two books, Range by David Epstein, that talks about how generalists can succeed in a world of specialization. And so never over indexing and going so far deep into a topic, but actually having a much broader range of experience across different types of topics can help lead to better connections and productivity. And the second one is Atomic Habits. And I think that one's like a tried and true, book about productivity. And so both of those are, what I'm reading right now. And they've had a really, positive impact as to how I lead my day to day.
Perfect. Range and Atomic Habits. Productivity matters right now. We all know that. Let's get into the core conversation. So you've got some really amazing experience having been at Looker for just over 5 years before they were acquired. Now you're at Google. Actually, before we get into your Looker experience, we want to talk about that. We want to talk about, the progression of what CS looked like throughout the different life cycle stages of Looker. What do you exactly do at Google now as the head of SaaS CS programs?
Yeah. So when we came into, or when the Looker team came into Google Cloud, we realized as a post-sales SaaS organization that we were going to be exposed to a much larger sales organization. And so to give you a sense of context of scale, the Looker sales team, when we were acquired, was about 800 people, 700 to 800 people. The Google Cloud sales organization, just sales, so like that's it, was about 25,000 people. And it's since grown, it's since doubled. So if you actually look at the headcount, that was back in 2019. Today, Google Cloud headcount is the largest organization or largest department within Google. And that's because of things like they've got the infrastructure team that's keeping up all the servers for YouTube and all the other services to run, right? But you also have the large go-to-market org. And so I moved out of, spending a long and really fulfilling career growing the entire CS motion, managing the CSM, segmentation, comp planning, you name it. We kind of did it over the course of 5 to 6 years. We realized that like our model for supporting customers was going to break if we exposed Looker to being sold to 25,000 people. We were used to like 700 to 800 people. And so if that customer volume started to increase, we needed to figure out proactively, what are the cracks in our process that if we were to say 10x the number of new logos that came in or 20x, how would we do that at scale? And so I stepped out of a day-to-day CSM management role and more into a program management, more kind of cross-functional programs leader that worked with the various departments, our sales engineering team, sales, product, support, and CS, obviously. And how do we support customers at that scale? And our hypothesis turned to be true, right? So after we had been acquired and we got integrated into the Google Cloud sales org, the number of new logos that we brought on per quarter jumped from about 100 to 120 up to about 400 to 600, somewhere in there. And so you can imagine that that's a pretty substantial difference in terms of new logos and how many customers we have to onboard and services that have to be delivered and new renewals that need to be managed. And so that's kind of the bridge that got me over into programs. And specifically what I focus on is supporting our CSMs at being effective and impactful in the field, digital success strategies, and then all of the things that go into customer journey, lifecycle mapping, et cetera. And coming to Google, that was an emphasis and focus on the Looker division. But as we honed and refined that process, we realized there was another big opportunity within cloud security operations, which is another SaaS portfolio of products. And that encompasses about 5 different security SaaS solutions. And I've since moved over in the last 12 months or so to take a lot of the experience and the things that we did well at Looker and apply some of that same learnings and methodologies to the security portfolio team.
It's known that you helped take Looker, which for those that don't know is a data intelligence platform, right? That's used fairly ubiquitously these days. It's known that you took Looker from, in your CS involvement there, from 2 million to 350 million ARR, average revenue rate, and from 50 customers to 3,500 customers. Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to kind of talk through the different phases of the life cycle and the maturity curve of what customer success looked like at Looker through those different phases, and trying to do that in the framework of people, product, process. So what did CS look like? Let's talk about, you were there at 2 million ARR. Okay, fine. So you weren't 0 to 1. So it wasn't the very infancy. You were probably around your Series A, type of phase. What did the org look like? How did you guys manage customers as far as customer success goes at those earliest days?
So we didn't have a CRM, if that tells you anything. So when I came in, this is circa mid 2014. Looker was getting some substantial traction in the market, but this was still the phases of the company in which we had our founder like getting on with customers and doing demos and trials and things like that. I think that there were a couple of things that stood us up for success very, very early on. Customer success came in a little bit later, but what was formed at the very, very beginning was a dedicated sales engineering organization. So how can we prove and stand up value and train our customers to get value out of Looker very early on? It's a dedicated SE team, a dedicated services team. I can get into that, and dedicated support team. And so I think often, like, just having that foundation there, when I came in 2014, all of those three teams had already been operating for about 6 to 9 months. And they were small, for sure. They were only, maybe 3-5 people. But at least having that sort of specialization kind of helped right off the bat, so that when CS came in and we started to form this division that was responsible for renewals and expansion and product adoption and things like that, we had strong partners to develop a good foundation and support our customers best. There was a lot of conversation back in the day that I was a part of. Do we have dedicated services? Do we not? Do we include an implementation package for free? Do we have customers pay for it? These were a lot of the questions that we were kind of grappling with in the early days. And we determined, after doing a couple of A/B tests, that actually having customers that pay for services, they were more likely to engage because they had some skin in the game. They had paid some money to get some sort of, if you just gave them some sort of, hey, we're going to give you a CSM and, we're going to try to get you onboarded in 90 days and there's no skin in the game, customer wasn't showing up. They weren't engaged, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's some pretty mature things that we had that were stood up on the org design, or like on the people design front. On the process, it was still very nascent. Like I said, we had SEs that were, getting involved and stayed on with customers for like 12 to 15 months. So we hadn't clearly defined like what the handoff in the process was going to look like. And that's because it was still all hands on deck to close every deal. Like, yeah. If that means the SE has to be involved all the way through to the renewal, like, great, we're going to make it happen. And, I think that comes down from our founder at Lloyd Tabb. And he was like, Brian, we will be successful when we have like 100 big champions. And so we were striving to get those 100 champions, from our first customers, people that would go out and tell our story about how Looker had changed their organization and things like that. So we were scrapping for every logo, and every customer that came on board, we were treating like gold. And then
was that a hard metric? Was that a hard objective for you? 100 customer champions across the client book?
So that was the rallying cry. We did not have like metrics or definitions as to what constituted a champion, but when you saw one, you knew what it looked like, right? This is the kind of person that like, they were on G2 crowds and they were writing us an amazing review. They were the ones that always wanted to meet with product because they were so involved with, trying to make the product better. They started to get involved with our community. They were asking about like, how can I do more with Looker? They were always pushing the boundaries. And so we knew it when we saw it, but it was the rallying cry that I think that we all kind of rallied behind. But no, we didn't have like an OKR that was like, we need to measure, these 100 champions and they've got to look like this and they've got to contribute these things. But rather it was just a way for us to really think about, let's make sure that we're building that groundswell of people talking about us in the market and over delivering for every one of our first customers. And if that means getting our chief product officer on a plane to go visit even the smallest of customers, let's do it, because we can do that now. We're funded, we've got the runway. Let's make that investment to get these champions. And, then we can figure out how to like make this more systematized on the line. And I'll come back to my original point, which is, you mentioned that third pillar, which is like kind of product and kind of what of our tech stack look like. We were managing everything out of a spreadsheet, right? We had one master customer spreadsheet. And because we had so few customers, we only had 50 rows in this spreadsheet, right? And, right around when I came on in kind of mid to late 2014 is when we were going to pilot with Salesforce. And so we were just bringing on a CRM. We were just bringing on a support tool to manage all of our ticket communications and things like that. But it was still back the Wild West of like, what customers are coming up for renewal, and everything was being fat fingered into this spreadsheet, right? And we had one person that was kind of like doing all the data of new deals that closed. They were entering everything in. So, it was not a pretty beginning. And I think this is like very startup-y. But very quickly we realized that we kind of had the need to grow out of that and, bring in actual formal tooling in the form of, Zendesk for support, and then Jira for product and project management. And then we started to build Looker dashboards and insights on top of that as well. So
how long did it take you roughly to get to those first 100 customer champions?
I want to say from when I joined, it probably took us about 12 months.
That's quick.
Yeah. And we we basically, we wanted to have enough champions that we ran a very early version of a customer advisory board. And we didn't even know what to call it at the time. But, in retrospect, this would have been in early 2015, mid 2015. So I've been in the role for about a year. And in that year, we had gone to visit every single customer. So I remember in the early days, I dragged our chief product officer and our co-founder along, and we did 20 customer visits in the span of a week, of business weeks, in 5 days. We were doing 4 meetings a day in the middle of a snowstorm in New York. that's
person.
Like, in person. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is like in the in-person days. So we lined up 20 meetings with every one of our New York customers. And we would do these like meeting blitzes, and we would go to Austin. And when we were in Austin, we're going to meet with everybody. And so we like lined every one of them up. We knew that could never scale. Come on, you're bringing like an executive along to every one of these customers. Didn't matter how much they were paying. But that was some of the things that we did in the early days to make sure that we were really investing in the customer experience, and that customers felt like they were being seen and heard. And some of those meetings, man, I went to a honky tonk in Austin, Texas with one of our clients, and like we went out to karaoke. Like there were memories for a lifetime. But I think that was a huge jumpstart to fostering a very solidified relationship with our clients early on.
Well, I mean, they say that honky tonk builds bridges, so I think that was a great approach that you guys took. But what really interests me is I have this personal thesis that a lot of that art has been lost, post pandemic and now in this remote working world, that we used to go as these small groups to visit customers, or they would even come to us, and you've got like the walk in the hallway, down the hallway to the conference room with your peer, and you're kind of prepping last minute during that conversation. Then you're waiting for them to come, and you're rehearsing things. Customer leaves or you leave, right? And then you're debriefing and you're internalizing. Oh, what'd you hear? And you because you each hear different things as well, especially from different perspectives and different functions you're coming from. I think a lot of that actually has been lost. So it's really interesting to hear you say that was an effective strategy going along with your product officer.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you. I feel like the conversation around supporting customers is over-indexed in the element of how can we do more at scale with digital success and things like that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're dealing with people, right? People that have families and friends and motivations and fears and drive. And when we were in the early days, we wanted to index on building those really strong connections with these individuals, because these were going to be the future champions and evangelists to go and sell the Looker product. And I'm so glad that we did that, because again, a lot of companies and a lot of leadership would be like, oh no, we can't send, the head of CS and the chief product officer all over the country. And no, we can't do that. Right. It's too expensive. It's too manual. But I think that because we had the leadership and the funding and the space to be able to do that, that set the foundation for, 2 to 5 years of just like amazing customer relationships that all flourished from those initial meetings. And so I would just offer a counterpoint to all of the people saying, we've got to do everything digital and, do things at scale, is do things that don't scale, and do those as much as you can to figure out what really works, and overinvest in the relationship side of the SaaS. So
you can't quote, do things that don't scale without citing Paul Graham, by the way.
Yes.
The great mastermind of that. But I fully agree with you. From a startup perspective, for sure, it's essential. For every company, though, I think it's a great way to kind of ground yourself in the right processes. So this is a year you'd been there. You started 2014, 2 million ARR. Let's just assume back of the envelope, you guys were at like 10 million ARR now. So that was the first tranche. So now we're at like the 10 million ARR to 100 million ARR. So maybe you're from 100 customers to 500 customers. You're at the mid-market level company. What changed? What did things start to look like then?
Yeah. So as we started to grow, a number of accounts started to increase. There was a couple of things that were happening simultaneously. So not only were we retaining more and more customers, so our retention rates were going up, but we also were increasing the new logos that we're bringing on board. So that meant that the actual pool in our customer base was growing considerably year on year. And we were starting to see a little bit of that hockey stick type growth. And this is where this whole phase of collaboration and specialization came in. And that's kind of the way that I would maybe summarize it, is the collaboration and specialization phase. And specialization, because within customer success, we realized up until that point, we had been filling a lot of gaps. We had been like meeting with customers and doing QBRs and processing renewals, and we've been doing all the things post sales. And we had to have this kind of, moment where we looked ourselves in the mirror and what are we going to focus on? What are we doing uniquely that we're going to partner with these other departments to really drive value within the organization? And at this point in time, when I started the team, it was very much on the spectrum of a commercially led organization, retention quotas, expansion quotas, things like that. And realizing that, and it looked more like account management, to be honest with you. And, over time, as we started to add more and more customers, and we were starting to think about how we can be more proactive and mitigate risk and identify customers that were struggling and help them along their value journey, I realized that we needed to change the model and allow for the specialization with the sales team to take over the expansion responsibilities, right? And so there was a big commercial change that happened in which CS matured and specialized and narrowed its focus on adoption and retention and kind of said, hey, sales, we're going to partner with you on this expansion stuff, but we're going to give away our Legos here. You guys you're going to take that over, right? In addition, we started to specialize within the support organization. So we started to spin up more regional teams right around this time. So we started to have teams in EMEA, teams in the US. We started to do a follow the sun model so that we could have better 24/5 support. Professional services also was maturing. So we started to put together a proper service catalog, right? Because up until that point, it was basically like an SOW with 25 hours and we kind of do everything. And so we were like, yeah, now we actually have to say what we're going to deliver and what we're going to, give to the customer. We started to have assets and things like that. And so that was kind of the specialization of each of the respective teams that were touching the customers. And then the collaboration was, how do we bring all of these teams together, right? They all are specializing. They're starting to specialize because before the company was small enough that I could go and tap the SE on the shoulder. But now we're starting to see these distributed teams. That we had the EMEA team. We had New York offices that was being spun up. We had Santa Cruz, which is our headquarters, San Francisco. So that's where, collaboration started to really kick in. And this is where we actually started to spin up. This is right around the 500 customer mark. I remember this. We started to spin up Slack channels per customer as part of the procedural process, right? So as a new deal closed and a customer moved from closed one, we had a Zapier integration that would kick off a brand new channel that would say, hey, based on this Salesforce account ID, I'm now going to map this Slack channel. We're going to spin it up. I'm going to invite the right people and say, hey guys, this is now going to be the Uber Slack channel for Looker. Invite the SE, the AE, the CSM, the renewals manager, all these folks be pulled in immediately. And that allowed us to have a little bit more of the collaboration while each of us were all specializing in our respective functions.
Now we're beyond. Now you're approaching becoming an enterprise organization. You're kissing 100, 200, 350 million dollars ARR and thousands of customers. At this point, what does it look like? We just talked about building real IRL relationships, but now at that point, are you all tech touch? What changed in that case?
Yeah. So I think that the collaboration and specialization continues, right? I don't think that that's a phase that ever ends. As you get into 25, 50, 100 million, you've got to make sure that you're really connected with the other teams that you're working with. And so that was hyper important. But circa 2017, we realized the CS team needed to mature and transform yet again, right? And so at this point, up until that phase, they had been, focused on retention and focused on adoption. And what we realized after taking a couple of, audits with the team and realizing, where CSMs are spending their time, we needed to introduce another specialized function on renewals, because the number of customers had grown. And we found in talking with our CSMs, all they're doing is processing renewal paperwork. That's all they're doing, right? And because of the way that they're compensated, why should they focus on anything else, right? And so we decided to bring in a new and more specialized role, which is renewals managers, that is like renewals operations, right? They're the ones that are making sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed on the contract. We're making sure we're doing some sort of uplift if we can, right? So for healthy customers, are we doing a 3% or 5% uplift? Are they navigating with the sales team about what expansion opportunities exist? And so That allowed us to, as the CS team, to then transform yet again. And we said, where is the business need now? And where we were in our trajectory, we said, okay, renewals are going to be processed by the specialized team. And they got really good at it, right? Because when you have a CSM that's doing commercial negotiation and adoption and relationship building, it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing. But when we brought in some of these like specialized renewals managers, man, they were sharks. They were great. And that allowed the CSMs to focus on the relationship building, the adoption, the value confirmation bit. And that's where I think that we've kind of landed of where we have our CSMs today. And so I offer that because that is kind of like the full journey of going from owning retention and expansion all the way up to like value orientation and adoption. And there's still metrics that we're associated on with revenue, right? GRR, NRR, CSQLs, which is the expansion opportunities we're passing with sales, things like that. We're still judged by those metrics. But the way we get there is by working with some of the larger enterprise organizations. And we're doing massive change management and almost acting as a pseudo change management consultant for the likes of a Walmart, right? If I'm Walmart and I'm rolling out Looker to 100,000 people, that's going to be a way different and more complicated motion than rolling Looker out to a 50-person organization that's a startup, right?
Yeah, very much hands-on. Okay, so it's interesting then. You hear a lot of debate, should CS own revenues or not? It sounds like you've seen kind of both areas of this. For companies that cannot afford a subspecialty like a renewal manager, where do you land on this?
My grandfather told me something when he was in tech, and he said, Brian, whatever you do in tech, stay close to the cash register. And it's always stuck with me. And, I think that, like it or not, there in software and subscription software, you're aiming to build a profitable and durable business. And that means money, right? So I think that often in CS, we get scared and we're like, oh my God, no, if I introduce, commercials into the conversation with my customer, it's going to totally erode trust and all these things. I don't necessarily see it that way. In order for, somebody in customer success to be respected and valued at the company, there needs to be some sort of monetary metric associated with it. And so I'm firmly in the camp that although we did partner with sales more over time and we introduced the renewals function, that renewals function still sat within customer success, right? We were the ones that were still reporting out. It was a different division, but it was within CS. We owned that renewal process. And so we were the ones that were forecasting what the GRR was going to look like and what the retention rates were going to look like and things like that. And then bringing, dollars to sales, I think also helped bridge the relationship where we said, hey, sales team, when you guys just go and try to source an expansion opportunity by yourself with a sales rep and you try to go and find some sort of opportunity, this is your close rate. When a CSM brings you a valid opportunity with a CSQL that's been validated, this is the close rate. And this is that uplift and delta there. This is why you should be friends with us. Because when we bring you an opportunity, it's not bullshit. It's not air and smoke or whatever else. We're bringing you a valid opportunity that has, often budget, need, authority. Like we've worked with the customer. We understand what they need. This is going to be an easy close for you. And so by trying to bring some of those, our goal is to help sales sell more and sell faster. And we do that by bringing them expansion opportunities and bringing them customer stories. And so I think by having those partnerships with sales, it really validated, where we stood in the organization to increase that prominence.
I fully agree. I think that customer success teams have the ability to be the superheroes of revenue, especially at a time now where we're seeing the pipeline getting tough and more competitive because of macroeconomics and just because of general competition out there in tech. And it brings you closer to sales. It aligns the functions. It is probably more streamlined for the customer as well to reduce that. And it incentivizes the team in really positive ways. So it's good to hear your perspective on this. But I certainly also understand the counter that, there should be a pristine and pure nature to the relationships we develop. Brian, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed listening to your story of helping to grow Looker to become a multi-billion-dollar company and fall within Google's impressive portfolio.
Yeah, Josh, thanks for having me.